Hello and welcome to the Deckbuilders buffet here at MTG Another Look. These card suggestion videos are like a buffet where you try a little of this, a little of that, and leave behind the cards that don't work for you. With that said, grab a plate and let's take another look at some commander cards that you might be missing out on. Let's talk about Odric, Lunarch, Marshal, originally printed in Shadows over Innistrad. Odric is a 3/3 human soldier for 3 and a white that says, at the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn if a creature you control has first strike. The same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. Odric, at the time of his release, was an updated version of Concerted Effort from the original Ravnica set, the first time a card like this had been printed to my knowledge. Concerted Effort granted your creatures most of the relevant keywords at the time, and does have a couple very important upsides over Odric, which are Landwalk and Protection. These two abilities can grant a sort of unblockability to all of your creatures if one has it. Playing a Dryad Sophisticate could grant all of your creatures the inability to be blocked if your opponent had a non-basic land, which they almost certainly would. Odric, unfortunately, doesn't grant any sort of unblockability. The closest he comes is granting Flying, Skulk, and Menace. While giving these to your creatures is undeniably powerful, it's not always the I win button that giving a board of creatures Protection or Landwalk is. However, Odric is built for the modern age, in which your creatures benefit a lot more from Haste, Lifelink, Hexproof, and Indestructible. Passing out these keywords for free after the initial 4 mana investment can be overwhelming and game-winning. Odric also functions differently from Concerted Effort in that he grants his abilities at the beginning of combat instead of at the beginning of each upkeep. This is beneficial and detrimental in different ways. If Concerted Effort granted your team protection from red, and your opponent wanted to target or deal damage to your creatures, Blasphemous Act wouldn't work. The only way to get around the keyword granting would be to use an instant speed effect during the upkeep while the Concerted Effort trigger was on the stack. With Odric, you can still Blasphemous Act Odric's team, even if he grants indestructibility to everything. Since he grants indestructibility at the beginning of combat, Odric and your other creatures are still vulnerable to wraths during the first main phase of each player's turn. But since he grants abilities at the beginning of combat, he's able to use his ability on the turn he enters the battlefield. Concerted Effort does nothing on the turn it's played, first triggering on your opponent's next upkeep. Odric can be played first main phase along with any other creatures, then grant haste and all the other keywords you have available to your entire team, and then Alpha Strike. That's very powerful. Granting haste to all of your creatures is so powerful that many decks dedicate entire card slots just to get it. Having 8 mana to play 2 or 3 creatures, including Odric, can make a surprise attack force that your opponents won't be ready for. He can help you rebuild quickest after a wrath without missing a beat. Lifelink, however, is probably one of the most underrated and powerful abilities to grant to an entire team, besides the obviously good ones like flying and indestructibility. A squad of mid-sized creatures attacking into an opposing board can easily gain you 10 plus life each turn, which can put you out of the range of manageability for decks on a similar footing. Breaking through your creature formation is one massive hurdle, but doing it quickly enough to offset the tons of life gained each turn puts them on a strict clock and buys you tons of time and breathing room to take over or close out the game. Odric makes a decent commander, but being mono-white really hampers his ability to be at the helm. He can be fun as a commander in a keyword soup theme, with Chroma, Vision of Ixidor in the 99, or the other way around. Chroma's partner ability gives you access to 1 or 2 more colors, which really opens up the deck building potential. Chroma's Will is also a huge bomb in any deck, but especially here. Odric is a powerful inclusion in the 99 of lots of decks you may not think of regularly. Even in decks like Atraxa Praetor's Voice with a +1/+1 counters theme, it makes sense to pop an Odric in there too to give every creature flying, lifelink, death touch, and vigilance. Odric doesn't need to fit the theme to give the deck a huge boost in power. Putting him in your Saskia the Unyielding deck grants every creature haste and vigilance, allowing the deck's aggression to continue unhindered and giving you a solid protection from attack crackbacks. Any of the Aurelias, in this case Aurelia the Law Above, can give your team flying, vigilance, and haste, and allow your team to attack, likely unblocked for free without fear of reprisal, and triggering Aurelia's draw and damage abilities. Next, let's talk about Klothys, God of Destiny from Theros Beyond Death. Klothys is a 4/5 legendary enchantment god creature for 1, a red, and a green. It's indestructible. As long as your devotion to red and green is less than 7, Klothys isn't a creature. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a land card, add red or green. Otherwise, you gain 2 life and Klothys deals 2 damage to each opponent. Klothys isn't so much a build-around card, as it is just kind of a good value card. Klothys reminds me a lot of a card called Deathrite Shaman, which is a powerful mana dork, graveyard hate, and a way to close out the game or stay alive when you need it. Deathrite Shaman was played a lot in Eternal formats like Legacy and Modern before it was banned. Granted, Klothys is significantly different than Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite was a 1-drop mana dork that could be played in black decks without green, ramped as early as turn 2, and was good in the late game as well. It fixed your mana and acted like a Birds of Paradise that could drain opponents' life later in the game. And, most importantly, Deathrite was powerful graveyard hate that was main deckable. Klothys costs 3 mana, but once it hits, it functions in a similar way. It can't be activated at instant speed like Deathrite, but it does have the ability to ramp you on each turn. It's good to get you from the early game into the 5 and 6 mana range for stompy decks. It's incidental graveyard hate on what turns into a creature, so it can slot into green and red stompy decks that don't want to dedicate entire card slots to dealing with graveyards. Decks like that love for the utility effects that every deck needs to come on a creature or a land, the 2 card types they're most interested in playing. Klothys will also incidentally gain you life and deal damage to each opponent when it exiles a non-land card with its ability. It can put a small clock onto opponents, and since it plays like the other Theros gods, it can dodge creature exile effects when it's not a creature, and can be a difficult to kill, beefy creature when it's turned on. Klothys plays well in some builds as Xenagos God of Revels, since alone it can allow you to ramp into your commander on turn 4, a turn early. Some builds want to dump Xenagos and go all in on attacking as quickly as possible, and then use extra combats, and some builds want a little more resiliency. In those decks that care about staying power to ensure they have a chance even if their plan A is shut down, Klothys can be a good way to ramp and deal incidental damage. Klothys can play well in other high casting cost commanders, like Rurik Thar the Unbowed, another deck that really cares about getting all its effects on creatures. Without 7 devotion, Klothys will still be a creature spell, but will not be a creature once it's on the battlefield. Or, Klothys can be played as just sort of a good stuff commander that utilizes damage increasers like Solfim Mayhem Dominus. Next we have Vat of Rebirth from Phyrexia All Will Be One. It's an artifact that costs 1 black mana. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Vat of Rebirth. It has a tap ability that costs 2 and a black, tap, remove 4 oil counters from Vat of Rebirth, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. Vat of Rebirth is a powerful aristocrats piece that works with your artifact decks too. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact or creature, token or non-token, you get a counter on the Vat for each one, and it only costs 4 counters and 3 mana to reanimate any creature. If you have your board set up with your Blood Artist effects out and a sack outlet, you can play any big token maker, like the classic Avenger of Zendikar, make half a dozen tokens or so, sack all of them for life drain, then immediately reanimate it with the Vat to do it all over again. Vat of Rebirth, for 4 total mana and 3 each turn after that, can double the number of life drain provided by any one creature card. Treasures and other artifacts also fuel the Vat, so it's immensely easy to always have the fuel for it to reanimate something each turn, while using the treasures or other artifacts the way you intended anyway. It's not like you have to sacrifice them to the ability to get the counters on it. You can also use the Vat reactively as Wrath Insurance. If a board wipe happens, you get a bunch of counters and can reanimate the biggest thing in your graveyard on your next turn. And the creatures you reanimate don't come back with a finality counter or anything like that. You can reanimate the same creature over and over every turn you activate it. Vat of Rebirth is a strong card that can fuel your aristocrats' energies, or be a way to give your deck a massive amount of attrition power. You can play it in a Mahadi Emporium Master deck that will provide you with plenty of treasures to constantly fuel the Vat, or play it in a traditional aristocrats deck like Elisil Core Sadistic Pilgrim to loop your creatures in and out of the graveyard for more life drain. and it's particularly fun to reanimate Kokusho the Evening Star repeatedly in reanimator decks. Next up is Barroom Brawl from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. It's a sorcery that costs 1 and a green. Target creature you control fights target creature the opponent to your left controls. Then that player may copy the spell and may choose new targets for the copy. Barroom Brawl is an interesting card that can destroy a lot of creatures in the right situation. If you're at a point in the game where every player has a creature, it's likely to kill 4. This card is a fight version of something like Tempt with Discovery. Often, the right way to play against a card like Tempt with Discovery or cards like it is to decline to take the benefit to make sure the caster doesn't run away with the game. But that's not the way it usually happens. Players are greedy and want to get as much value as they can, even if it benefits the caster way more than it would them. Barroom Brawl is situationally a card that punches way above its weight. At worst, it's a 2-mana fight removal spell, and at its best, it's a board wipe. You always get to choose the creature your opponent to your left controls that would benefit you the most to destroy, and then each player has an opportunity to copy the spell and try to destroy another creature until it goes back around the table to you. It can loop around the table as many times as players choose to keep it going. I think it's best to play in situations where everyone has a bit of a clogged board state, and you can cause a little chaos and see how many things will die. Green has a real problem when it comes to playable removal spells, and almost every fight or bite spell can only destroy 1 creature without paying tons of mana in it with something like Spinning Wheel Kick. It probably fits best in a deck like Finn the Fangbearer, which will likely have a deck full of Death Touch creatures. You're guaranteed to destroy something you want, and likely for a very low total mana cost. It works great in decks where your whole board, or at least one creature you want to fight with, is indestructible, like Marika Brutal Gladiator. Marika can even get you a 2-for-1 off of the fight, even if no one chooses to continue it. It's also a shoo-in for decks that care about fighting, like Neith of the Dire Hunt. However, I think it's worth it to try out in decks that don't have a lot of access to removal, like Mono Green or Simic or Gruul decks, since it's a 1-for-1 removal spell, or nearly a Wrath if things go right. The last card is Arcum Dagsson from Cold Snap. He's a 2/2 legendary human artificer for 3 and a blue mana. He can tap to have target artifact creature's controller sacrifice it. That player may search their library for a non-creature artifact card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Arcum is an immensely powerful card that can sometimes single-handedly win you the game if he's allowed to use his tap ability once. Arcum's ability is almost a tinker, a card that's banned or restricted in every format it's in, and for good reason. The artifact you sacrifice has to be a creature, and the artifact you search can't be a creature, but Arcum is almost a Magus of the Tinker. Arcum can sacrifice any mana creature like an Ornithopter of Paradise and pull a Portal to Phyrexia out of your deck for free. It's absurd the amount of mana cost you can cheat with 1 tap, and then he can do it all over again the next turn. Or, God forbid, you have an untap effect to do it multiple times a turn. Arcum's ability doesn't require a non-token artifact creature to sacrifice either, so any old mirror or construct token is good enough to search out the biggest and meanest non-creature artifact out of your deck for free. His ability doesn't have to be used at sorcery speed either, so a cranial plating can be searched out at instant speed, attached at instant speed, all in the declare blocker step to get in a massive chunk of unblocked damage. Or it can search up a Darksteel Forge at instant speed to make an impenetrable board state. Arcum Dagsson is a kill-on-sight card, and if you haven't seen it tap, you may not know just how absurd it is. He can fit well in almost any artifact-themed deck, since almost all of them play artifact creatures, cards that can make artifact token creatures, and have big mana artifacts that they would love to pay 0 mana for out of their deck. Urza, Chief Artificer, makes artifact creatures to sack to fuel Arcum's search ability. Muzio, Visionary Architect, has an ability that would be a good follow-up to Arcum's. Cheat a massive artifact into play, then look at the top X cards equal to its mana value to find another big artifact to cheat into play. Saheeli, the Sun's Brilliance, makes artifact creature versions of creatures or the big artifacts you find with Arcum. He can be a massive power-up to any deck with even a mild interest in artifacts. Thank you for watching, everybody. What do you think about the cards we discussed today? Are these cards diamonds in the rough, or just more rough? Are there any cards you think are hidden gems? Let me know in the comments down below, and give the video a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I will see you next time, and have a great rest of your day.